to the Concussion Discussions series brought to you by Integrated Brain Centers. I am your host, Amy Zellmer from Faces of TBI, and today I am here with Dr. Deborah Zelinsky from the Mind Eye Institute, and we're going to be talking about how eyeglasses can impact the brain. So welcome, Deborah. So great to have you here.
Thank you, Amy.
Well, I'm excited to jump into this conversation about eyeglasses. And, we think of eyeglasses and we just think of like vision, right? Like we think of, can I read all those letters on the screen? But eyeglasses in particular, what you do, are so much more than that, than just acuity. So where would you like to start?
Well, I guess you start where you started, the eye test. When you look at an eye chart, it's a high contrast because it's got a white background with black letters, and letters don't move. And you can take as much time as you want to look at them, so there's no reaction time involved. And usually it's in a darkened room, so the only thing you can see is the letters in front of you. And it's not really representative of how the 21st century life is. When the letter chart was invented, it was 1862, and the peripheral eyesight wasn't really used. It was used, but it wasn't used the same way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially for patients with concussions and other brain injuries, they have fragile nervous systems. They don't quickly adapt to environmental changes. And a lot of the changes that they don't adapt to are from the peripheral eyesight. And that's not assessed very well and extensively in a typical eye exam. So what the Mind Eye Institute is trying to do is to change the way optometry exams are done to catch up to the technology that's being used. Because even children in school are used to working on computers, and there's pop-up videos, and there's movement, and it's when they look up at a teacher, it's PowerPoints that they're watching. It's not somebody handwriting. So the issue becomes, somebody with a brain injury, can they handle a lot of changes that are going on with lighting and with sounds in their periphery? And if they can't, who's assessing it? Because a regular eye exam typically doesn't, because a non-concussed person sees fine and can adapt and just deal with it. So my thoughts would be that the eye exam has to be updated, because for brain injured patients, it's no longer sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, in the real world, we're not sitting in a dark room with, nothing else happening. There's cars driving by us. We're scrolling on our computer screens or our phones. Just people walking by, right? I know for me, in the early stages of my recovery, like if anybody came from my left side, it just made me like jump, that startle reflex. So what are some of the things that you do in your exam, that are different, that address some of these specific things with concussion and brain injury?
One thing we do that's different is we have the patient move around, because if the whole exam is done when the patient's sitting, you're not really measuring what's happening as they move. And so that's a big thing. And then while they're moving, we put different kinds of glasses on them to see how they adapt. And the adaptations have to be both with their mind adapting to the way the perception is changing, and their body adapting to how the center of gravity is shifting. Another thing we do differently is we take the patient out of the machine. The instrument that's typically used for testing blocks off the side eyesight, and is testing the straight ahead eyesight. So we do those tests because that's a standard exam, and we find the lens that makes them see that sharp 20/20, which is seeing a small letter 20 feet away. But then we take them away from the instrument in free space, and we test how aware they are of location of targets. So it's not just an identification system of seeing a target and identifying it at a conscious level. It's being able to see a target and know where it is quickly and subconsciously. So we'll test that navigational ability, and then we test the identification ability, navigation ability, orientation ability of how easily their balance can be thrown off, and then we'll test visualization ability of in their head how they visualize, how they process. Um, in addition to that, we work with sensory integration of how the eyes and ears would link together. Because a lot of times patients have perfect ears and perfect eyes, but they're photosensitive or sound sensitive. And it's usually because their eyes and ears are not synchronized together. And so we're going to see what kind of glasses we have to put on to, what kind of glasses we have to put on in order to synchronize that. Let me turn my phone off. So.
And, I know there's a statistic out there that roughly 90% of people with a concussion, brain injury, are going to have some sort of visual related problem, whether it's reading or the peripheral vision. That number's pretty staggering. That's like almost everybody. um,
Because
and
you're disrupting your brain.
yeah, and it's so overlooked. I know the neurologist kept telling me oh, it's just in your head, and the neuro-ophthalmologist told me my eyes were fine, and I knew they weren't fine.
They are
So
fine. I agree with the
the eyeballs are fine.
eyeballs are fine, and it's a neuro-ophthalmologist is a different field from where I am. I'm an optometrist, but a neuro-ophthalmologist is a medical doctor who specializes in eye diseases and that subspecializes in eye diseases linked with neurological diseases. So like Alzheimer's or epilepsy or pupils that are really weird or optic nerves that are bizarre. So if you don't have that, the neuro-ophthalmologist is overkill.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you think of it though, if you have a brain injury of any sort, something gets unplugged. And sometimes you can just plug it back in, and other times the outlet isn't working anymore, it's damaged. And you have to then figure out, okay, well, where can I plug it in a different place? And then if you find a different place to plug something in, it might be, way in a corner where you're not used to using that part of your brain. So then you have to have rehearsals and, use your brain over and over and over and over until that becomes the new way of doing things. But yeah, I agree with you. Most of our patients come in with some sort of visual processing problem or some sort of disruption between their eyes and ears. And then the newest studies keep showing, Alzheimer's shows up in the eyes, multiple sclerosis shows up in the eyes, epilepsy, all this stuff, high blood pressure, diabetes, everything going on in the body. A lot of things you can see in the eyes, sometimes way before the symptoms in the body get really bad.
Mm-hmm. They say the eyes are the windows to our soul, and there's something to that, right? Like as a photographer my entire life, I loved that saying because like I would always capture like you're focusing on the eyes, and now that I'm coming at it from a brain injury survivor perspective, it takes on a whole other meaning for me.
I spoke to somebody in the American Heart Association, and she was saying that they have a thing that the eyes are the window to the heart because the blood vessels, you can actually look at the blood vessels in the eye and you can predict strokes. And that's been pretty neat.
That is pretty cool. So, Dr. Zelinsky, when someone comes to you after they've had a concussion or brain injury, I'm sure that they've often been to, 20 other providers already before they find you. But what is it that makes what you do so different? And I know one of the things is your brainware glasses that you guys are using. So tell us a little bit about that and how that is helping people.
Well, we design glasses that aren't necessarily for 2020. There's two parts of the eye, the straight ahead part in the center and then the side part. Most of the time, they're testing each separately, but not as a unit. So we're testing them how they work together, and then we're using our glasses and designing them customized for each person to not necessarily keep them at 2020. It might be 2025, or it might be 2025 with one eye and 2030 with another eye. But we're trying to get the balance of the two peripheral systems to work, and the balance between the eyes and the ears to link together. So the brainware technology is such that it's not it's the testing to figure out what to prescribe for the person that's different. Um, if we have people coming in with headaches and nausea and light sensitivity and just fatigue and brain fog, and yet they're seeing crystal clear, if I take away a tiny, tiny bit of their central eyesight, but make their peripheral eyesight less distorted, and their symptoms vanish or lessen, they don't care that they've lost one letter on the eye chart. I mean, we've had so many patients who come in with glasses 3 and 4 times the strength that we're prescribing.
Wow.
Because with the triple strength, they see every single letter. But with a third of the power, they're seeing almost all the letters, not exactly, but the side vision isn't distorted. So the whole concept is, when you sharpen the center, how much does it distort the side? And if your eyes are different from one another and one has a stronger prescription than the other, that means you're magnifying or minifying one side of you, and then it's going to distort your posture. And then it just throws off your sense of balance. So it creates confusion. And then what if you put glasses on that are extra strong so you see really well, but now your listening ability is compromised? So you have to realize that when you're looking at an eye chart and there's one letter in front of you, your eye is also taking in information from the sides, the bottom, the front, the top. The whole room is pouring in. And you're now trying to say, I'm going to tune out everything except that one little letter. So Patrick Quaid in Canada did a study, and he demonstrated mathematically that of all the information pouring in, 94% of it we're ignoring in order to pay attention to 6% of what's straight in front of us. And the part that we're ignoring is we're still aware of it, but we're aware on a subconscious level. But if there's somebody who's got too much attention on that little 6% of what they're looking at, and they're completely tunneling, or they're tuning out without maintaining awareness of the sides, then they're more prone to anxiety, because then they're not aware when something's coming at them. It'll just pop out and it'll scare them. And then you have to say, well, why in the world would we ignore 94% of the environment? And that's because of that 94% of the surroundings, it doesn't represent too many pathways in the brain. So they're of the 1.2 million signaling pathways headed further into the brain from the eye. 1.2 million fibers exit the eye. Of those, almost a million of them are from that 6%. They're carrying a lot of details from what you're looking at. So if I want to pay attention across the room to a tiny detail on a light switch, then a million pieces of information are coming in. And from the side, where there's a water bottle here, maybe 100 pieces of information. And maybe from over here, there's 500 pieces of information. So your brain doesn't have much from all the peripheral parts, but those peripheral parts are very crucial because they're linked with the sleep centers, they're linked with mood regulation centers, they're linked with balance and posture centers. So they're guiding whether or not you bother to put your attention on that 6%, or whether you start doing things in your head. So even though there's not that many of them, they're very important.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've heard you talk before too about people like with depth perception problems, and how you can make, I'm going to explain it poorly. I'm sorry. Like, you can make the floor come closer to them in their vision,
Mm-hmm.
to help them with their depth perception.
Exactly. I can use glasses to tip the floor different directions. That'll shift
Yeah.
their center of gravity, shift their balance. It'll activate cells. So if you're tuning out your right side, and all of a sudden I shift the floor so it tilts down this way, you're going to lean on your right side, and then all of a sudden you'll activate it and become more aware. So I can turn on people's awareness, and when it's turned on, that will enhance depth perception. So indirectly.
So, Dr. Zelinsky, if when someone comes to see you and you prescribe a pair of your glasses, um, do they typically stay in those forever, or do you like adjust them over time? How does that part of it work?
They're more like crutches. Like you use them while you need them, or it's more like going from a wheelchair to a walker to crutches to a cane to nothing. So we have two kinds of patients. The biggest amount of patients we have come in and they never need glasses. Like they're like, I've never had glasses. I see great. I've always seen better than 20/20. And so those types of glasses, when we put them on, are purely to give them the experience of connecting their eyes and ears and give them the experience of activating their peripheral eyesight. So that type of glass, we might change 2 or 3 times as they go along their process, but then they won't need them in the long run. The other type of patient are those who have had glasses all their lives. They always need them to see. And so what we might do is blur their central eyesight a little to enhance the periphery, because the key is still developing the peripheral awareness. And then once their peripheral awareness is solid and developed and linked with the auditory systems and the localization ability, then we can put the sharpness back into their glasses and they can tolerate it better. So we split people into minds and bodies. Their minds have attention and awareness. And so we play with that relationship of what they're paying attention to and how much they're aware of. And then the bodies have relationships between comfort and tolerance. And we play with that relationship because the more comfortable they are, the more aware of their environment they'll be. The less comfortable they are, the less aware of their environment they'll
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to imagine that getting these type of glasses and I can just imagine how calming it is to not have all that extra overstimulation
be.
and just diminishing some of that hyper focus that they had been having.
It's true. When the peripheral eyesight gets hypersensitive, then anything in the environment bothers it.
Mhm.
And but you're right. It's very gratifying to watch people put something on and just watch them melt. We had
Yeah.
a mother and a daughter, and I put something on the daughter, and the mother was like, "Oh my God, I got my daughter back," because she could just watch her daughter turn back to herself. So that's the big issue: is people who've had concussions, they don't feel like they're themselves, and they want to come back. They want to be back to who they were. And so we take into account who they were before and how they processed in their brain before. If you get somebody who was never a reader in their entire life, they don't care if they can't read anymore.
Right.
But you get somebody who's a voracious reader, who's in 5 book clubs, who then can't read, and they're miserable. And so it's not the task. We're not looking at it as the task itself. We're looking at it as who were you? How do you feel? How do you process change? Were you a sulker? Can you adapt easily? Are you a go with the flow person? Or were you a person who had to do things a particular way and it was always a do it this way or I can't do it? And we cater to who the person is when we're designing a prescription, because we can use prescriptions to push them a little bit, or we can use prescriptions to make them more comfortable. And so it's the mind eye optometrist choice. We're now expanding mind eye and teaching other optometrists, and so any of us can do that, but we each learn how to individualize what we choose.
Well, Dr. Zelinsky, thank you so much for being here today. And if people want to learn more about you, we have all your links below this video, but they can find you at mindeye.com and on Facebook and Instagram, the Mind Eye Institute. And if they have further questions, they can just give your office a call and schedule a consultation, right?
Or they can write info@mindeye.com. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Amy, for having me, and thank you for what you're doing for people who have concussions. I mean, it's you have transformed a lot of people's lives, and the people that you're putting together, like for your upcoming book, is just incredible. So I'm happy to
Thank
be a
you.
part of it.
I'm glad to have you part of it. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any videos in this series. Like this video and head to Amazon to purchase Concussion Discussions.